The Hunger Games was showing at the cinema. I thought I picked a seat in the back row, but turns out what I had done is I'd booked a seat in the front row, and I was looking at the screen the whole way round.
Did they not say the front rows at the bottom when you picked your seat, or did you do it online without any guidance?
Kobe, I don't think you've really factored in how hungover I was.
Do you have a favourite kill in there? Before let's finish on the dark note before heading to the scores.
Which child death did you most relish? You're asking me.
Hey everybody, joining Flixwatcher today we have Al.
Hello.
Sadia.
Hi.
And as always, Kobe.
That's not whistle, is it?
That sounded like the Close Encounters.
If you didn't get that from the whistle, I don't know how you didn't get it. We're talking about The Hunger Games. Thank you as always to the mighty people for the mighty, mighty tunes. And thanks to Ben from Rockwood Audio for his awesome editing skills.
Please do remember to write a review and rate us on Apple Podcasts and anywhere you can do where you listen to the podcast, because it really does help us.
And you can join in the conversation with us on Twitter
At FlixWatcherPod and on Instagram
at Flixwatcher. Hello film fans, welcome to this episode of Flixwatcher Podcast. Our guests today are Al and Sadia. Over to you please, Sadia, to say hello to our listeners and tell them a little bit more about who you are, please.
Hi everybody, I'm a comedian, presenter and writer. So I've recently written a memoir called Sex Bomb, and that's out available for you to buy in paperback. And yeah, I love all things comedy. I do love movies as well. And yeah, so that's why I'm here.
Well, you said, for your book, each chapter is titled by a film. Can you give us one or two of the titles and why you chose those film titles for those chapters?
One of them is called There Will Be Blood. And I love Daniel Day-Lewis. That was a very scary movie that I could not stop watching. I actually, talking about all these movies, I just want to I don't know, we should just do all of the movies in one podcast episode. Anyway, I'm just digressing. But that was such a phenomenal movie. I picked it because that chapter is particularly quite a shambolic period of my life. And so it felt a very befitting chapter. Another chapter is Clueless, which is when I talk about being a little bit younger and not knowing much about dating and stuff like that. So yes, movies have inspired my memoir, and I've used different fun movies to mark each chapter.
Oh, awesome. Who are you in my bottom right corner?
I'm Al. I am the host of the Script Apart podcast, which is a podcast in which screenwriters revisit their first drafts of beloved movies like Back to the Future, Die Hard, Brokeback Mountain, so on and so forth. I am a screenwriter, I'm a journalist, and very fittingly for today, I'm also someone who once had a minor panic attack watching The Hunger Games in a cinema by accident.
A panic attack by accident? I mean, you don't have panic attacks on purpose, but I mean, give us a bit more.
Well, no one has one on purpose, but there was an accidental component to, I don't know whether you guys get this, but basically New Year's Day, I'm not a superstitious person, but on New Year's Day, I really feel like I have to start the year as I mean to go on. I really feel like a pressure to do something that shows some momentum, no matter how potentially hungover I am. I need to be doing something with that day. So yeah, this is going back years and years to whenever the first Hunger Games came out. But yeah, I was a little bit worse for wear, and the Hunger Games was showing at the cinema. I thought I picked a seat in the back row, but turns out what I had done is I'd booked a seat in the front row, and I was looking at the screen the whole way round.
Did they not say the front rows at the bottom when you picked your seat, or did you do it online without any guidance?
Kobe, I don't think you've really factored in how hungover I was.
And was it a full screening? Did you not feel you could just go? Sorry.
This was a full screening. So yeah, didn't have a great time. I was basically watching it with my nose touching the screen practically. I don't know if being in the front row, why do they have a front row? It's just not a satisfaction. They should make the front row 6 rows back.
I've thrown tantrums about that before. I can't do it.
Can I break this thing for you though? Because there's also the lunar calendar. So who's to say you go the first day of the year by that calendar. So I don't know. I'm just thinking if that was me, what I would say to myself to break out of the
You've got a
pressure
second
that I'm
chance.
putting myself. Yeah,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
look, don't worry about it. There's always the other lunar calendar to go by or something. I don't know.
That's what I should have done. Yeah, but no. Instead, I just was completely overwhelmed by the sensory experience of, what it turns out for what is, ostensibly a YA story, turns out it's a pretty kind of bloody and violent and massive sensory experience. So, yeah, that was a wild ride.
I'm going to yes and you with that. I did exactly the same thing for Batman Begins in IMAX.
Oh.
And that was my first time going to IMAX screening, and Batman Begins, when Scarecrow went nuts, I was like, I don't know what is going on here anymore, guys. And I didn't go to IMAX for years after that. So it's just like, what's the point? I don't say why we do this. And then you get to IMAX for something like Gravity, and it's like, well, this is why you do IMAX. This is because it's fucking excellent.
Row E is like the lowest you can go. You've got to go higher than that.
This is back at the time, me and my friends just decided to go see it like on Sunday afternoon. We're like, let's go and see it. Which scenes are left? Yeah, let's go and see it. Anyway, so I can understand that panic attack situation, because some of the scenes in this are a bit you don't expect it for this kind of film. Anyway, tell us what kind of film it is with the synopsis, Al.
Have I got 60 seconds?
You've got 60 seconds starting now.
God, okay. Pressure's on. This is my own personal Hunger Games. Okay. Jennifer Lawrence plays Katniss Everdeen, who is basically a girl living in this sort of dystopian future in this society called Panam, which is a futuristic version of America post this sort of very bloody revolution in which like a dictatorship has sort of taken over. Her younger sister is selected for this thing they have every year called the Hunger Games, where kind of like a battle royale type thing, they pit loads of youngsters from each of the different districts of America against each other, and there's one person left standing. Katniss's sister is picked, so Katniss volunteers herself instead. There's a love triangle. The guy who she kind of is picked with from her district is kind of involved in this love triangle, as is her boyfriend from back home. And the whole thing spawned a bunch of sequels that kind of get to the heart of propaganda and war and what it means to, oh, look at that. I was close to finishing a sentence.
Let's start with the bit I'm least convinced about with this film, and that love triangle. Sadia, where were you on the Liam Hemsworth, the guy who plays Peeta Mellark, because I don't know his name, and I'm not sure if he's been in films since.
Did you say Liam Hemsworth, isn't it?
Yeah. What do you make of that love triangle in this film?
A Hemsworth.
I don't know. I don't really... I wasn't that convinced, maybe.
Helen, Al, love triangles, other films and this.
I was just going to say that I'm a big fan of this film. I think the cast is great and there's a lot of stuff that I really like it. However, the two love interests are a bit wet. I think in terms of like casting, neither of them are particularly like hot, and they're just a bit meh. I mean, at one point, Peeta is dressed as a rock using a moss that he's found, and he's lying down. It's not so, but I think it's more to emphasise the fact that Katniss is kind of taking on the male role, and she's the stronger character. That's kind of how I approach it. But yeah, Peeta, I don't even know who that actor is. I'm really sorry. I think he's a bit wet, and I think he's a bit forgettable. And it's the other Hemsworth. It's not like the big one. So yeah, I mean. Stanley Tucci, I think, is amazing in this, and always love seeing Donald Sutherland, and Woody Harrelson is great. So like the older guys, like they're cool and they look great and their costumes are great and they've got a bit of like pizzazz about them, whereas the two love interests are just a bit wet.
What about your main guy, Wes Bentley? I thought you were going to mention him.
Oh yeah, sorry, with his stunning facial hair. What happened to him? He was hot, wasn't he? And then he wasn't.
Times the breaks in Hollywood.
But yeah, I mean, everyone else is hot apart from the two people who you're meant to find hot.
Oh, Liam's not that bad. Don't say that.
Lenny Kravitz as well. Lenny Kravitz is Cinna.
Forget he's in that. He turns up and you're like, shit, it's Lenny Kravitz. What's he doing here? With his gold glittery beard. Oh, there's so many great moments rewatching this. It was great. I loved it.
Al, like I say, I just wanted to start on the bit which I didn't resonate with me. Where were you on the love triangle before we get to stuff that's a bit more fun, I think, in this film?
I think the love triangle is the most undercooked element of this film and the entire series, but I think there's a Trojan horse element to this where I think it's Suzanne Collins who wrote the book. It's almost as if like 'cause a lot of YA stories, a lot of YA novels have that at their heart. They're kind of love triangle-y.
Yeah.
And it feels like one of the ways in which they were, she's like, well, I'm going to make this look like a YA story. Like there's a love triangle over here, guys. But actually, what I'm doing is I'm packing in this big meditation on sort of war and propaganda and the media machine, capitalism, and I'm gonna sort of like slip that in under the guise of a kind of YA action romance thing. So I think it's pretty smart. I do think some of the things that are quite wet about Peeta are some of the most interesting things about the film. Like, yeah, he is quite wet, but the fun thing about the Hunger Games, I suppose, is because he and the other characters are constantly being surveyed either by the capital or by an audience as part of the games, you're never quite sure whether someone's acting as themselves or whether they're sort of acting up to one of those different audiences. So Peeta, at various times, you're like, are his like affections for her real, or is he putting it on? Is some of his wetness kind of a ploy to kind of get pity and sympathy? And there's just an interesting, you can't ever quite pin down that character, and it's only really in the later films that you kind of work out exactly who he is. So yeah, I'm a big fan of this film and this whole series, and yeah, sometimes wonder if I had been a teenager when this had come out, I would have probably been pretty radicalized by it. It's quite like it's pretty impressive in sort of how riled up it gets you about some really quite relevant kind of political issues.
Because it's not just, those are the things, and maybe we can address the remaining films as part of this discussion without going into the spoilers, and the books as well. But I really enjoyed, I think this film is fantastic apart from the Love Triangle, which is why I set it up at the start. But then the other book after this, Mockingjay, I think it is, then it goes really into the propaganda side of things and the anti-establishment leanings, and it's like, oh, well, she has really underpinned this whole story, which is on the outward side of it is a, like I say, typical YA romance, but it's so much more than that, and it does make you think. I think they've dropped the ball with the last book and the last films just weren't anywhere near as interesting as the first two. But I think the initial concept, I think, is really, really good. And as you talked about at the start there, Al being almost freaked out by being in the front row of this, there's some pretty brutal stuff in this, both from a capitalist point of view, like the haves and the have-nots kind of thing is really starkly different, but also the action in this is for a film which is ostensibly aimed at kids is out there, really. I think I would have loved this if I'd been 13 when this came out. This would have been right in my alley.
Yeah. It's funny, like the action is so intense and obviously the concept is so similar that I've encountered a lot of people who are quite sneery about the Hunger Games, and the phrase they always come back to is like, it's just battle royale. However, my thing I always say to those people is it's like battle royale and Hunger Games, it's both this Greek myth. Like it's I'm gonna butcher the pronunciation, so I'm just gonna avoid it. But yeah, there's like Greek mythology that's underpinning this whole story. And even the name Panam is, I think that's a translation of bread and circuses, which is like what it means to kind of distract people from their real problems. You give them bread and circuses. So like there's all this stuff threaded in through the movie that's kind of actually pretty profound, but as you say, it's like kind of wrapped up in a little bit of romance, some kind of tokenistic romance, but also mostly just like a lot of bloody spectacle. Like there are some really intensive action scenes in this.
Helen, action scenes, your favourite parts of this film? You said you liked it.
The bit where he hides his rock. I just forgot that was in there, and it was quite funny.
So Catching Fire is the second film, Mockingjay is the third, yeah.
Yeah, I think there's some like serious kills, because basically they have to kill each other to survive. So there is some like serious kills in that. And I think it's really interesting that I really, really like the costumes of all of the like, what are
districts.
they? The elite.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
Not the districts are poor and sad and drab, and it's awful. And they're eating squirrels to survive. And then the elite live in this amazing place and they have these amazing costumes. And I'm there watching it going, oh yeah, they look amazing. Like, I just love the design. And I'm like, hang on, they're evil. Mm-hmm. This is all bad, but I'm being sucked into it. And there's like an amazing moment where she's wearing this dress and it catches fire. CGI is a little bit shoddy, but it's still a great moment. And I just really love how she's just doesn't want to play the game. She's just going to hang out and survive, and is really conflicted about killing people to survive. And she's kind of like really reluctant to do it, and only really does it when her survival is sort of depending on it. Like there's a moment with some like, mega wasps or whatever they are, where if you get stung by them,
Or crackerjackers or something like that.
I prefer mega
like
wasps.
it's really scary.
That's a great term.
Really, really scary wasps that if they sting you enough times, they kill you, or you have like a really, really bad trip. And she's involved in an incident that causes the death of someone through that. And it's really fucking bleak. And it's like really, really stressful as well, because people are just getting killed, and she kind of befriends, is it Rue, the one of the younger competitors?
Amanda Stenberg is doing decent things at the moment.
They kind of have like this little relationship, and it's really, really sad when she dies. So it's a really hard-hitting, quite emotional film that is really intense and bleak, but it's sort of pitched at kind of teenagers. So yeah, there's a lot going on. I've seen Catching Fire, which I thought was good, and I didn't finish it off. I don't know. I think I was very much like, you're making too many films out of this. And I think it's interesting that they switched directors as well. So this was Gary
Ross.
Big Ross, so the guy who did Big. And then they switched to another director, and
When they feel they can get more money.
they kind of all brought the different things to it. So yeah, I haven't finished it. So maybe it's inspired me to kind of like catch up on the rest of it. But yeah, I think it's a really interesting film.
I think they're all on Netflix at the moment. So, I mean, if you've seen the first two, I mean, I'm going to go, Sadia. How many of these have you seen in the series, Sadia? It's just the first
Only
one you've
this.
seen others. Yeah.
I'm not a huge, okay, please don't hate me. I'm not a huge Jennifer Lawrence fan, so it wouldn't normally attract me to it. Oh, I don't know if I've said that. Sorry, Katie. But
What did we do that
she's-
made you think-
she's good. I feel like conceptually this is like quite brilliant, because it's like taking an idea into its very extreme, and so that's quite a very fun space to experiment in. I'm mindful of kind of throwing that at younger people without kind of, I don't know, it's kind of almost like, it's not even titillating them, but it's like these things, they don't really have like a resolution. So I think that's a little bit frustrating when I kind of like watch movies like this, because it's just like you're stuck in this world. And I don't know, I suppose they're telling them a lot about the realities of certain agendas and situations, and helping them make sense of a lot of the madness. But yeah, I think conceptually it's like quite striking and very thoughtful.
I think it'd be, if you do get a chance, guys, to watch the subsequent films, because it does go, like I say, a lot more deeper into the revolutionary side of things, less time spent in the actual like Hunger Games arena. And I think it loses a bit of focus when it gets there, but it is quite engaging as to the overall direction that the author had gone down. And when you're talking about the shift in directors, Helen, I think the similar thing happened with the Twilight films, where for me the first one was actually the most interesting, with a more kind of independent spirited director. I can't remember that. Is it Catherine Hardwicke directed the first one? And then they shifted. They were like, we can make more money from this, so we're going to kick you out and give it to a director that's used to spending more money. And I think that kind of makes it lose its edge as well. We don't get much of Toby Jones in this, which is weird.
I was a bit confused by how little he's in it.
But it's always a pleasure to see him.
Yeah.
For how little he's in it, you could have just got anyone.
Yeah.
But I don't know, maybe Toby Jones just fancied a day on set. Who knows?
Maybe just wanted to sit next to the Tooch with his radiant big smile and bright blue hair and stuff.
I was just going to mention Jennifer Lawrence. I mean, I'm a bit hot and cold with her. I think sometimes she can be brilliant, other times I can find her a little bit just not quite right. But I really, really like her in this, and this probably would have been... I think this is just great. I think she managed to bring that kind of like vulnerability and also that kind of like toughness as well. And I was reading about it that when she was kind of cast and the film came out, she was criticised that she didn't look skinny enough. Her physique was too muscular for someone who apparently was living off squirrels.
She's so tiny, but also even if she wasn't, it's like that's such a horrible thing like to say about an actress. Like
they didn't say that about the guys. They weren't like, hey, these guys are too buff to have been living off squirrels. So I just think it's kind of interesting that
she's
judged on her looks, basically, is it?
Jennifer Lawrence is pretty good on the red
the
carpet,
time.
isn't she? She fights back against people asking what clothes you wearing. She's like, fuck off.
Oh, I like that.
I kind of agree with you, Helen, in the Jennifer Lawrence thing. I always think of Arrested Development. There's a kind of running gag where Jason Bateman's always like, to Michael Cera, talking about his girlfriend, Anne, and just going, her? Who? That kind of thing. And every time, for a while, people saying Jennifer Lawrence is like, are we talking about the same person? Because she didn't seem to have this magnetic awesomeness that people had, but in this, she's like astonishing. I think she's great in this. In others, I'm like, she's kind of cool. But when you see her on the red carpet, when you see her personality does come out a bit, I think I can see why people work with her a lot. I can see why she does get interesting roles and things like this. And this would have been a fantastic, obviously, film series to be a part of. I'm sure she fully enjoyed it. Has she been? She's not been in any Marvel films. She's been in X-Men, I guess, but not any of the recent MCU stuff.
No, that's been the extent of her franchise life, and I don't think that's where her priorities lie. I think she much prefers the Mother type projects of this world. I actually quite like Mother, so I'm one of the 6 people on the planet that love it. But
that's an intense film as well.
Those are the sort of roles that she tends to be gravitating towards, and I think we're lucky that we have her.
Do you have a favourite kill in there? Before let's finish on a dark note before heading to the scores.
Which child death did you most relish? You're asking, Toby.
Very dark, Kobe.
Maybe not. I mean, maybe I've phrased that incorrectly, but which one kind of hit you the hardest in terms of, whoa, that's pretty harsh. I thought, the Cracker Jacket, there's Wasp that killed that one character whose name we'll never know. Her death was pretty grim with all the bee stings, and then Jennifer Lawrence like peeling the bone out of her cold, stiff, dead hands. I thought it was quite nasty.
So bleak. The ones at the start, when the timer goes off, I think like one of the younger kids gets like bludgeoned quite early on. The one with the little blonde kid with the curly hair.
Yeah.
And he just like gets like slaughtered with an axe quite early on.
Oh, he had no chance, did he?
The starting off kills are like,
cornucopia.
You're like, whoa, yeah. It's going to be bleak.
Well, I did like that kind of setup where you had Woody Harrelson, Cinna, Elizabeth Banks' characters, like training them up and like trying to teach them how to play the game a bit. And I like Woody Harrelson. This is a similar kind of character in Edge of 17, where he's like a bit of a cynical, grumpy bastard in a way, but also having a bit of fun with himself.
He's come to play that kind of role. He's a bit like that in the Triangle of Sadness as well. Like if there's drinking involved, then it's like, let's involve Woody Harrelson. He's good at playing like a grumpy old drunk.
Any scenes for you, Al, that you want to pick out before we head to the scores?
I'd say the scene where she, being Katniss, kind of throws the spear. Like she's ignored. Did she throw a spear or did she fire an arrow? She basically is being ignored as they're kind of all these kind of elites are adjudicating the kind of contestants. They're all kind of looking away and having their feast. Yeah, she shoots this thing straight into the apple in a pig's mouth. And yeah, that was the real first sort of sign that, okay, everyone else is fighting each other and there's a trajectory here where she's going to be fighting them. And that's like really interesting. So yeah, there are moments like that kind of make me sit up every time. And I don't know, I just enjoy the entire thing. I think it's structured really well. And even the sort of end fight at the end with the sort of the kind of crazy dogs or whatever they are. Yeah, really, really good.
Before we head to the scores, there's a new film coming out. How interested are you in watching that? And that's a prequel to this film?
What?
There's a prequel to Hunger Games. Al, tell me.
Yeah, there is. Yeah. I'm going to get the name wrong. I think it's called, it's a ballad, a song of snakes, a ballad of snakes and something or other.
Let's just call it prequel to Hunger Games.
Let's call it Hunger Games Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. So... yeah, I have curiosity about this rather than sort of like counting down the days.
Oh my God, I need to see it. Yeah.
I'm excited for it because some of the kind of talent involved is really strong. But whether or not it's a story that particularly demands to be told is, to be... I believe it's like the sort of origin story of Snow. And he's humanized here in a way that he isn't in the films, in the kind of existing trilogy or quadrilogy, whatever it is. So yeah, I'm like gonna watch it. I'm sure it'll be good. The novel that it's adapted from did really well and got pretty strong reviews, so I'm sure it'll be worthwhile. And to be honest, like this world is just so rich that I can happily spend more time in there. I'd like to have the dots joined for me a bit more on how like America became Panam, that sort of thing.
I'd like to spend time in each of the different districts a bit more. I'm more interested in that than Snow.
Yeah.
The Rise of Snow. I think spending time in the different districts and that side of thing would be really interesting because each of the districts have their own kind of interesting makeup and rules and law and stuff like that and people that live there. So for me, if films were going to explore that would be really cool. Right, should we head to the scores?
Let's head to the scores.
I'm Sam Clements, host of the 90 Minutes or Less Film Festival, another podcast in the Stripped Media family, a podcast that celebrates movies under 90 minutes long. Each episode, I'm joined by a special guest who selects a movie to join our prestigious lineup. Past guests have included fellow Stripped Media family members Martin and Sam from Song by Song, and Kobe from Flixwatcher, and Dave from The Wire Stripped. Search for us now on the app you're currently listening to this podcast, or join us at 90minfilmfest.com.
So welcome to the Flixwatcher scores. The scores are always out of 5. You can have decimal places if you wish, and we'll start with you, please, Al, with your recommendability.
Recommendability is 5 out of 5 because I think this is a good, exciting action blockbuster, but I also think it's like increasingly relevant to the world we live in. And yeah, I think on those two reasons alone, it's a max. It's 5 out of 5 for me.
Sadia.
I will go for 4 because I think it's a solid watch. It's very violent though, and I don't love that. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a great concept. I think people will really, really enjoy it and take away from it.
Helen.
So I think this is a really timely rewatch to be thinking about it, to kind of like get an understanding of dictatorships and what fascism could look like, and being oppressed and people being hungry, and the need for uprising and a revolution and people having power to make changes. Could be good to have a little bit of that. And I really enjoyed rewatching it. I think it still really holds up. I give it 4.7. I think some people might be put off by thinking that it's like kind of like a teeny film, but I think it's much cleverer than that and much smarter. So 4.7.
I think I wasn't going to say people being put off by the teen aspects. I think some people might be put off by the level of violence that you're not potentially expecting for this kind of story. So I'm going to mark it 4.5 because I think some people would. It wasn't overly gory. It's just kind of strikingly like, oh, holy shit! I didn't think they were going to actually twist a kid's head off his neck. So 4.5. Repeat viewing score. Al.
5. I mean, it just, as I say, like the film was released, about a decade ago now. And as Helen kind of alluded to there, it's like, without bogging down the podcast too much with my political views, I think like the idea of the Hunger Games in which like political powers can pit regular people against each other in Hunger Games or culture wars, whatever you want to call it. I think like the point the film makes in that regard only gets more and more relevant and more interesting as time goes on, seemingly. So yeah, it's a film that really invites repeat watching, I think.
Sadia.
I'm going to go with 3.8. And the reason I'm going to say that is because, first of all, like Al alluded to, it's pretty much of a Hunger Games outside the window, you know what I mean, when you go outside, do you know what I mean? So you're watching it anyway.
You don't watch it for your entertainment when you're living it, is what you're saying?
Well, for me, going back to my earlier point, is just I find it really frustrating when things are stirred up and then it doesn't lead anywhere. So I'm not inviting a revolution per se, but I just feel like, especially younger impressionable minds, I think on one level it will be very inspirational for them to have like this information at a point in their life where they're growing and stuff. But unfortunately, in my current position in the Hunger Games, it feels as though it's difficult to kind of resolve very simple things, let alone some of the bigger problems. And so I just find it really frustrating when, like, yeah, it feels like you're kind of given ammunition, but you can't really do anything with it. I don't know if that makes sense, but I just feel like it's a bit, obviously, maybe it's good as a realistic aspect to it that I just, yeah, there's enough Hunger Games around, isn't it?
Helen.
I am inviting a revolution if you are interested in...
Well, you're allowed. I don't want to go to jail.
Well, yeah, I mean, the way things going, everyone may end up in jail. Have they got big enough jails if everyone decides to protest? Can they arrest us all? Can they? If everyone decided? Anyway, different time.
I feel better about this because of your confidence.
Katniss Hellendine.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I enjoyed the rewatch. I've seen it a couple of times now. Probably wouldn't watch it again, I think. I'd quite like to go back, I think, now and rewatch Catching Fire and finish it. I think it's given me enough kind of like, you know what, I really should watch this and put aside the fact that they split the last film into 2 to try and make more money. Put it aside because it's on Netflix now, so...
Was that Harry Potter that did that first? Because I mean,
I think so,
it was
yeah.
tedious, wasn't it?
I would say I think it's justified splitting the two rather than condensing it. This is one of those that like it
Ooh.
warrants
He's got a cheeky
it.
smile, guys.
Yeah, I have got
He's
cheeky
very
smiles
cheeky
out.
smile.
I think it's.
I'll trust
yeah,
you,
Give it
Al.
a go. Let me know what you reckon. I think it works as two films.
Okay, I'll invest it. So on the basis of that, I'm going to go 3.5 for repeat.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go for 3. I've not seen it much. I saw it in the cinema. I saw them all in the cinema when they first came out. Probably seen this one again, maybe once since then. I'll watch it again. Sure, why not? I'll probably watch the rest of them. If I do plan to see the next one, the prequel, I'll probably rewatch the others before going back into that. And the others, you get some really interesting characters. Philip Seymour Hoffman notoriously died whilst making the Hunger Games sequels. So they kind of make those films a bit more interesting in their own way as well. So, but this one, yeah, let's go 3.2. Small screen score. Al.
Well, you don't want to watch it on a big screen in the front row and have a panic attack like you did, but you do want to kind of, I don't know, this is like a blockbuster popcorn movie, and if you want to just enjoy it on that level, then you can. So it is a movie made for the big screen. It lacks a certain something for seeing it on a smaller screen, but that said, kind of watching it on like your TV at home on Netflix, because you're not quite as dominated by the spectacle of all of it, you do, well, I certainly found myself a bit more attuned to kind of like the politics of it all and the sort of nuances of what it's saying about, all the things we've discussed, like war, governments, and how
Greed.
how they kind of manipulate. So it's a different viewing experience. I'd say it's a 3.5 on small screen ability. What was the official phrase we're using? Small screenness?
Small screen score.
Oh, okay, there it is. Close.
Just alliteration there, Al. Nothing like trying to
Small
challenge Oxford
screenability.
English Dictionary. 3.5. Sadia.
Yes, I would probably go for a 3. I don't know what the budget on this movie was, but certainly a lot. And as Helen mentioned earlier with the costumes, and there's a lot of kind of grandeur. I don't know if that's the right word, but I think it is one to be celebrated on the big screen. But I don't know. I think younger people probably like their phones quite a lot and the small screen, so they probably would enjoy it. Yeah, 3.
3. Helen.
Although I was way over like the target audience for these when they came out, watching the first one and the subsequent one as well, it felt like a really big event. I mean, we don't think we really have it that much. Maybe Marvel films a little bit, you get that, but it was a really exciting thing to try and catch this like super early at the cinema, sitting at the back, never near the front. Oh,
Just digging into
I
Al's
just
there.
feel
His nightmares.
the
We live in his
panic
nightmares.
that would just, I couldn't do that. That said, the CGI maybe is not quite aged as well as some CGI. I enjoyed the kind of collaborative watching experience back in 2012, so I'm going to give it a 4. I think when the new ones come out, you should definitely check them out in the cinema, but this was fine for the rewatch, so 4.
Yeah, I'm going to join in the 4 there. I think it's fine on small screen. I can't remember much about the soundtrack. And I think nowadays you have a few kind of even more bombastic miniseries and TV series which kind of show costuming in a light. Things I haven't seen, like Bridgerton, for example. I think they go deep into costume and stuff like that, which works really well on the small screen. Engagement score. Al.
It's another 5 for me. God, I'm getting predictable. Yeah, no, I don't know.
Oof.
There's something about this sort of combination, as I say, of like popcorny, the sort of like gravitas of it politically and all that sort of thing, all the kind of rich thematic nature of this movie, that doesn't overwhelm the just bombastic roller coaster ride feel of it. Like you've got both. So yeah, all the way through from start to finish, I'm a 5.
Sadia.
I will go for a 4 because it is pretty gripping, and the gravitas of what you're watching is really hard to ignore. I'm not a big fan of violence, so that's a little bit of a downside for me. But yeah, yes, go with a 4.
Helen.
So my brain had like a real struggle trying to remember what happened in this one and what happens in like the next one.
Oh, really?
It's like, it was a bit like, there's a moment in the second one that I was convinced like it happened in this one. So when it didn't happen, I was like, that definitely must happen in the second one because it's not happened in this. Yeah, I think it's pretty good. I think it's maybe a little bit slow to get going, but once they get into the training and like the games start, like I think it's really well paced. And yeah, for the fact that I just struggling to remember what was going on, I was pretty engaged. So yeah, 4.5.
Yeah, another high score. Let's go for 4.38. Put somewhere in amongst the rest of you guys. It's good fun. I like the. I was saying about it being like a popcorny flick, and I think that's right. That's probably why. That's probably where it'd rank in my going to cinema experience. Is like, let's grab a big bag of popcorn and maybe some, I don't know, cheeky ice cream
Peanut
as well.
M&Ms.
No, not peanut
Good
ones. What are you
choice.
talking about?
I like that.
Just the other pick and mix. Get some fudge in there. Why not? Get some fudge and the fizzy cola bottles. Mash them all together.
Ben and Jerry's,
Not much more
man, all the way.
Well, my cinema is Baskin Robbins, which does disappoint me somewhat. But
Really?
they have, yeah.
Oh, ice cream, any ice cream, come on.
But that gives us an
Smuggle
overall
it in.
score of 4.130000, which is good.
Yeah, it's good. Anything over a 4 is a good score.
Yeah. Guys, Al, Sadia, can you tell us where we can find you online and your writings, and say goodbye to listeners?
Well, you can find me on the Script Part podcast, which is available from all your good usual podcast outlets. You can find us on Script Part on all the usual social media places. And yeah, we're back soon with season 4, which has some pretty insane guests. So yeah, we're really looking forward to that. Yeah, if you want to find me in my kind of personal capacity to kind of catch up on my writing for Empire and The Guardian and other places like that, you can find me on Al_Horner on Twitter.
And Sadia.
Nice. When I'm not street performing stand-up comedy, I usually am on I'm not usually on the streets, don't worry. No, I am a comedian, so you'll probably see me at a club somewhere, but I also write, so you can purchase my book Sex Bomb, which is my memoir, in all good bookstores. It's also on Audible, and please do follow me on Instagram. I'm at Sadia_Azmat.
Awesome. Thank you very much, guys. It's been a pleasure talking about the Hunger Games. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, guys. Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Enjoyed this episode of Flixwatcher podcast? Why not leave us a 5-star review on iTunes? You can also follow us at FlixWatcherPod on Twitter, and we're at FlixWatcher on Instagram. Thanks as always to the mighty people for their mighty tunes and Rockwood Audio's editing skills. If you're looking to get your podcast edited as sweet as this, get in touch with Rockwood, ROKK Wood Audio. Tell them Flixwatcher sent you.
You just heard a Stripped Media production.